Shalom. This week, we begin our adventure into the second book of the Torah, the book of Shemot. And in it, we have a wide, sweeping chain of events taking us from the birth of Moses to his escape from Egypt, his marriage to Tzipporah, revelation at the burning bush, the beginning of the 10 plagues, and Moses' confrontations with Pharaoh. Basically, if you've ever seen the Prince of Egypt, or you've been to a Passover Seder, or maybe the 10 Commandments, you have a pretty good idea of the content of this Parsha. But sometimes we have to peek behind the curtains and see what's going on behind the scenes. While we know that Moses is the protagonist of the story, and we know a lot about his life, and he'll take us continuing on in the journey through the 5 books of the Torah, we are introduced to some amazing women who begin the process of redemption right in the very first pages of the book of Exodus. First, we're introduced to Yocheved, who is Moses' mother, who refuses to allow her son to be killed. She puts him in a basket, sends him down the Nile to be saved with the help of Miriam, Moses' sister, who's a prophetess, and she knows that Moses is destined to be a leader of the Israelites one day, and so she takes special note of him and ensures that he will be raised properly, and he is raised in the house of Pharaoh. Now, who else are we introduced to who take a center seat in their workings and their behind-the-scenes activities to transform the Jewish people, or the Israelites, from slaves to free people? We see the precious Mealdot HaIvriot, the midwives. And the midwives have a very special role in this week's Torah portion. I like to focus on them as what they did and what we can learn from them in understanding what does it mean to be an activist? What does it mean to be religious? What does it mean to be a true helper and the hands of God in this world? So when we meet these Mealdot HaIvriot, they are the Hebrew midwives. We learn that one is named Shifra and the other one is Puah. And Pharaoh said to them, don't allow the babies to be born. Basically, if it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. But they had some resistance. The midwives, it said of them, Vatira'enna hamialdot et ha'elohim. Verse 17, chapter 1, that they were God-fearing. What does it mean that they were God-fearing? Well, it says that, it goes on to say, that they let the boys live, basically. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said, why have you done this? Why have you let them live? And the midwives said, well, these Israelite women, they're not like the Egyptians. They're very vigorous. That's what they said. Ki chayot heina. They're vigorous. They're full of life. And, basically they're doing what they need to do and we can't stop them. And so they are positively looked at by God, Vayitev Elohim lamialdot, that God looked kindly on them. God basically rewarded them. And how were they rewarded? They were rewarded with batim, with houses, it says, with households, which the Midrash goes on to explain. What does that mean? That they had a future, that they were, that perhaps Shifra and Puah were not really Shifra and Puah, but Miriam and Yocheved, and that they were really like the heads of households of royalty among the Jewish people. But what we will focus on here is this idea of Vatira'enna hamialdot et ha'elohim, that they were God-fearing. Now, there's a note in the Eitz Chaim that I want to share with you of what does it mean that they were God-fearing, and what might that mean for us? So the note says that the closest the Torah comes to having a word for religion is this idea of Vatira'enna hamialdot et ha'elohim, that they were God-fearing. The case of the midwives suggests that the essence of religion is not belief in the existence of God or some theological precept, but belief that certain things are wrong because God has built standards of moral behavior into the universe. That idea of believing that certain things are wrong because God has built standards of moral behavior into the universe. Pretty amazing. The midwives not only believed in God, but also understood that God demands a high level of moral behavior. They were willing to risk punishment at the hands of Pharaoh rather than betray their allegiance to God. And this is the first recorded case of civil disobedience, challenging government in the name of a higher authority. It would find an echo in thousands of righteous Gentiles who risked their own lives to protect the Jews from the Nazis. The midwives begin a pattern that is continued in the story of Moses, whose life is repeatedly threatened by men and saved by women. It is through the righteous women that Israel was redeemed. So how were these women, the Mialdot HaIvriot, how were they rewarded? So some explanations are offered, but I'd like to give us one more. The Hasidic commentator, the Mea Shiloach, the 19th century Polish commentator, understands that their reward was that they were given these batim, houses. But he understands those batim as being metaphorical houses. He understands the house to be a metaphor for peace of mind and a sense of security. When people fear man, he says, then there's no peace of mind. There's no yishuv hadat. But when we fear God, then there's a sense of security. A home and a shelter is in our sense of faith. Peace of mind is the reward that God gives the midwives. Peace of mind for doing the right thing. My blessing for us is that we dig into these amazing narratives that are within the content of the book of Exodus. These are the stirrings of our redemption that we could dig into even now. Looking into the book of Exodus to understand how might we sense our own process of revelation today. Standing up for what we believe in, standing up against what we don't believe in, being helpers, aiding redemption in whatever way we can by being good to each other and kind to each other and keeping in mind what is it that gives us peace of mind, not just now, but for ourselves and our family and our communities well into the future. May we be blessed, each and every one of us, to be those helping hands in this continual process of redemption. And let us say amen.